Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. As you know, Jim Garrity is away. He'll be back sometime next week. Keep reading the Morning Jolt, of course. But here in his place today, we're very happy to have Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, contributing editor, National Review Online, Fox News contributor, author of Ball of Collusion and many other excellent books. And we've got a full plate as usual. The news coming at us fast and furious. But Andy, it's good to have you back.
Greg, it's great to be back. And I have to say, usually during the football season, I will josh about this, but it actually really is impossible to fill Jim's shoes with what he's doing in Ukraine, which is the most important reporting that's going on in the country. I imagine it's got to be maddening for him to be there, really in the thick of it, where people are putting their lives on the line and developing the real facts of what's going on in the region, and then to have to deal with the insane politics here, where it looks like Trump is determined to make the same mistake that the United States has been making since probably Clinton, maybe Bush. 41, but every one of them wants to see Russia as I've always thought this was insane, as a strategic partner. I think that was what Condi Rice's description of it was. And it's absolute lunacy. We have like an anti-American murderous mafia boss who has never changed his spots a single time, nor given any sensible indication that he had changed his spots. And every single administration, doesn't matter which party, since back in the day when Reagan said we win, they lose, that was the last moment of clarity we had with these guys. Every administration since then wants to look at Russia, and in particular wants to look at Putin since the 90s, and see something there that isn't there. And it looks like we're just going down that road again. And I'm so glad Jim, tremendous professional and personal cost in the sense of how much time he has to devote to this and what he's got to do to get information. I'm just so glad he's doing it.
Well, yes, he's certainly there at a momentous time in terms of the news cycle and where we stand with the war here at the 3-year anniversary. There's supposed to be a strategy here with being kind to Putin in public and tougher on Zelensky. We'll see if that plays out in due time. But it's definitely unnerving for a lot of folks, Jim among them. Nonetheless, let's get to our actual good martini. And that takes us down to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, usually with instincts in the right direction. And here he is once again with the issue of property taxes in many different parts of the country. Florida certainly among them. Assessments just keep going up and up and up, and everybody's furious about their property tax rates. But not just because the taxes are higher, Andy, but because in many cases, it's stupid that we pay them. But I don't want to steal his thunder. Here's what he says.
And, these property taxes, it's like you buy a home, you buy land, maybe you buy the home outright, but maybe you pay off a mortgage over 30 years. And then, okay, you've paid off the mortgage, you bought the land, you've been taxed many times. It's like, is it your property or not? Just for being on your property, you got to write a check to the government every year. So you're basically paying rent to the government to live on your own property. And our homestead exemption is not strong enough to help these folks because the property gets assessed so high. And that's the thing. If you buy a home for $300,000 and there's certain tax, well, then what? 10 years later, they say it's worth $700,000. And so, and they say, there's homestead stuff that helps protect you to a certain extent, but you're paying more. And a lot of people can't afford that. So I think that that's a big issue. And I know we're going to be really looking at ways to bring people relief from that, because I think it's been really something that's pinching a lot of homeowners, particularly seniors on fixed income.
Yeah, and folks who don't make a lot of money either. I mean, nobody likes income taxes either, but at least that's based on what you're bringing in. Property taxes, if you lose your job or like you said, you're on a fixed income, you're just out of luck because the assessment just keeps going up and up and up. And again, you already own it. It should be yours. Here in Virginia, we've got this stupid personal property tax where you've bought your cars and you're still paying a percentage on it to the government. it's insane. And everybody's going to throw up their hands about, well, how do you pay for schools and all that? Well, they'll find another way, but at least it'll likely be based on your income or your consumption or something else. But this is just the most unfair tax out there, and I'm glad he is going after it. There's not a lot the state can do. It's usually assessed by the locals, but hopefully he can find some relief, and other government officials can too around the country.
He's really bucking the trend in an important way, because this reminds me, Greg, of wealth tax proposals in a way. You know, you make money, you pay tax on it when you make it, and they come up with these schemes that your assets should be taxed, you know, if they're fixed enough, and if they're associated like property is with people who have means as opposed to others, they figure out scams to make you pay it again and again and again. And I always think we're kind of backwards. I mean, we're going to talk maybe a little bit about Elon Musk too, but I think this is kind of thematic in the sense that I always think what you should do is like figure out how much money you need to pay your obligations, and then like figure out how many people you need to hire to do the job, or to how much money you need to tax in order to get what you need to spend. So I think we're crazy with the amount of time that we spend on the front end of that equation, namely like how many people are we going to hire and how much are we going to assess your property for, without factoring in what do we need to spend in order to cover all the things that we say we need to have. That's an insane way to do things. It's not a responsible way to do things. And what I hate about the property tax thing, and DeSantis is entirely right about this, is the lack of transparency. What's happening is, in most places, property taxes go to support the schools. But we don't do like a ratio of what do the schools need in combination with what can we take in property taxes if we're going to be rational. What we instead do is we pay gargantuan amounts of money for education, which has become a scam because they say it's for the children, but actually what you're paying for is administrators, and increased costs that particularly go to people who are represented by these teachers unions and these other extortionate arrangements that they have. But there's no rational correlation between that bundle of stuff they want to pay out and property taxes. So what they instead do is they continually inflate the property taxes as if, as you just pointed out, like your $300,000 house is worth $700,000. No, that's not what's going on. It's what they need to squeeze out of you because of all these commitments that they've made. And I do think if you had more of a transparent connection between what it is you say you have to pay, like what these things are in our budget that we're saying now that we want and we want to be responsible for. Now let's talk about, well, how are we going to pay for them, and actually pay taxes in accordance with what we say we need to spend on. What they do instead is they want to make the spending in as much of an opaque black box as they can, and then they have these revenue-raising schemes, and that's what they are, which don't have any rational correlation to what it is we're trying to spend. And that results not only in the craziness of things like property taxes, but also out of control deficit spending, where you're having to borrow to cover your obligations because you never have to justify why you have these obligations because they're disconnected to any of your revenue raising.
You're so right, because that's the game that the politicians will play. I didn't change your tax rate. I just jacked up your assessment by 10 or 20%, and that same tax rate means you owe me a whole lot more money with no detail at all on why my assessment went up so much. And it's just maddening.
But it's what they want to do. It's the trend. I mean, if you let progressive Democrats run the way that you do revenue raising, you would have to be assessing your fixed assets every year and then marking them to market and getting that assessment, even though you were taxed on your asset when you got it in the first place. And what they never say, of course, is if you mark stuff to market, there could be losses. You know, I mean, whether you're going to pay those people back, of course they're not going to pay. They're the 1%. Why should they need anything, right? So the whole thing is a scam.
Well, if that makes you stress out and your blood pressure is off the charts, maybe you need a doctor. But when was the last time you needed to go to a doctor, but you just pushed it off or didn't even go at all? Thought, yeah, I'm too busy. That pain will go away. I'll feel better soon. Either way, whatever the excuse is, booking a doctor appointment can feel very daunting, especially if you're not exactly sure which doctor to go to. ZocDoc is the answer here, though. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. I have used ZocDoc before, both in searching for physicians and in scheduling appointments with doctors that others have suggested. It's a very simple process, better than waiting on hold for someone to finally take your call and then digging through all that stuff. And they actually find people who are on your insurance plan. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML. ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, on to our second martini now, and this is directly related to what Andy wrote for National Review Online yesterday. It's kind of a two-headed approach to what we also talked about yesterday, and that's the Elon Musk email to federal employees. Write me back telling me 5 things you did last week, and tell me by midnight Monday or midnight last night, and everything will be okay. A lot of blowback to that. We talked yesterday about how being asked to respond to a simple email seemed to throw people into hysterics. So that's kind of a crazy part of this. Andy, you talk about the impulsiveness of the order itself, largely in response to a Trump tweet or Truth Social post suggesting Musk get more aggressive. But you also point out in this story that in kind of the upheaval of all this, there's actually a major upside potentially for the Trump administration in terms of defining the power of this DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. So explain what you mean by that.
Well, to take that issue first, because I think we're going to hear a lot about it. We're already hearing a lot about it in court proceedings. It's very murky to try to understand exactly what Musk is doing, because on the one hand, the way it's covered, and I think sometimes the way that they project what he's doing, he's actually making the cuts. Like he says people get fired, they get fired. He says contracts get canceled, they get canceled. Now, under our Constitution, it's fair enough to argue that all of executive power is vested in the president. And therefore, if the president wants to delegate power to somebody to, say, analyze the books so we can figure out what people are doing and how much we're paying and that sort of thing, he can consult with whatever or whoever he wants to consult with. But as we also know, and this is Trump certainly knows this because this is the basis on which he got Jack Smith's indictment thrown out in Florida, right? In the government, if you're one of the people to whom the president delegates so much power, such significant power, that you're like a cabinet level secretary or sub-cabinet or an agency head, that you're actually using sweeping power, then under the Constitution, you're regarded as an officer of the United States. And an officer of the United States, in order to wield those powers as a delegate of the president, either has to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate, or has to wield power under a statute where Congress defines the qualifications for somebody to be in the job. So now we get to Musk, right? The media likes to say so-called DOGE, as if it doesn't really exist as an authentic government entity. And they keep complaining. Who knew that progressives didn't like unaccountable bureaucrats with unchecked power? But that's the thing with Musk, right? He's an unaccountable bureaucrat with unchecked power. In point of fact, DOGE is a legitimate entity in the government. It is a component of the executive office of the president, which is basically the president's staff. The executive office of the president was set up by FDR at the beginning of the sort of fledgling administrative state in around 1939, where Roosevelt was making the executive branch much more robust, We had war on the horizon. There's a lot going on in the 1930s, right? So they do this kind of reorganization of the executive branch in order to control its expanding responsibilities. Now, some of the components of the executive office of the president are statutory, like the Council of Economic Advisors, the Office of Management and Budget. The National Security Council is statutory. But not every single component of the executive office of the president is, but the structure of the EOP is. And what Trump did when he came in was there was a entity within the Office of Management and Budget that was called the U.S. Digital Service that Obama had set up in 2014 in order to deal with the catastrophe that was the rollout of Obamacare. So this entity has existed for over a decade, and all Trump did was overhaul it and change the name of it. So that's DOGE, or this United States Department of Government Efficiency Service, which is the actual name of it, is just a refinement of the U.S. Digital Service. But it's not so-called. It actually exists as a government entity. Now, the interesting thing that we've learned in some of this litigation is that Musk is not a member of DOGE. He's just running it. But that's not the most unusual thing that goes on in the government. There's a lot of top presidential advisors to whom entities within the White House staff report to. So even if they're not members of that staff, it's still completely legitimate that they could be guiding their activities. But the thing with Musk is they've characterized him or described him as a special government employee. And it seems to me the reason for that is Musk, well, it's twofold. One is Musk doesn't want to give up his day jobs, right? And if you become a full-time, high-level government official, you got to put all of your assets and businesses in, trusts or insulated arrangements so that you're not running them while you're wielding your government authority. Plus, Musk has a very complicated life, financially, personally, etc. Probably didn't want to go through a searching confirmation process, which would have looked into things like foreign ties and all kinds of stuff, and would have been complicated. That gets us to the second reason, which is this is like the main thing, or one of the main things that Trump wants to do besides border security. So he wanted to hit the ground running with DOGE. And if Musk had to go through a confirmation process, that wouldn't have happened. There would have been delay. So the problem is that there's a lot of question about what is Musk's status. Is he actually giving orders? In which case, there's a good argument that he's an officer of the United States and should be subject to Senate confirmation. Or is he just giving advice and the implementation is actually done by the president or by the agency heads who actually have gone through or are going through the confirmation process? What the White House likes to put out there, because they like the idea of the swashbuckling Elon, is that Elon's doing everything, right? He's giving the orders. But when they get challenged in court, they're like, whoa, he's just giving advice. He's not, he's not even in DOGE. And that's become frustrating to some of the courts, especially Judge Tanya Chutkan, who has the case that involves the 14 blue states that are trying to stop DOGE in its tracks, right? So far, she's refused to stop DOGE. She wouldn't give a temporary restraining order. But I think she's laying the groundwork to make a finding that he's an officer of the United States, he needs to be confirmed, and that everything he's done to this point without being confirmed is illegitimate. So I don't mean to be long-winded about this, but that brings us to this farce that took place over the weekend. And the reason I think that this probably helps the government litigating position is Musk very impulsively said, tell me the 5 things you did last week. And instead of doing what like a good manager would do, and I'm not saying Musk is one of the smartest guys in the world, but, he's not in his element right now. He's never been in the government before. He's never been in politics before. Musk has this tunnel vision about cutting the government. So everything he sees is about cutting the government. But if you're actually in a government agency, you have a mission that you have to be concerned about. So the way to find out what people are doing is to go to the agency heads and tell them, get back to me about what all your people are doing, because they're the people closest to it. You don't go to 2.2 million people and say, tell me what you did last week, because if you get them to do that, they could reveal investigative information. Not advertently, it's just like the nature of the beast, right? They could compromise things about the mission. They could say things that create legal liability for the government. They can compromise classified information. I know they were told not to give up classified information, but a lot of times what's classified is pretty fuzzy. So this was not a smart thing to do, but the result of it was that even the Trump-appointed agency heads, and I think one of the best ones here was actually Kash Patel at the FBI, who was among the first to say, no, we're not doing that. We're the FBI, we'll run our own personnel. And he told everybody, ignore what Musk said. And a number of the other agencies run by people who were very connected to Trump, like Rubio and Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth, they all told their people, don't do it. And I think it helps the administration in the sense that Musk can now say, look, he gave advice and they didn't take it, which confirms or at least strengthens his position that he's not an officer of the United States, that he's just somebody who's giving advice, and sometimes he gets rebuffed.
All right, let's talk about Taylor Brands, another great new sponsor. Are you one of the 60% of Americans who dream of starting your own business? And if you are, what's holding you back? You're not alone, because fewer than 20% actually take that first step, because building a business is tough and a decent percentage of them actually fail. So the key is to getting off to a good start. And that's where Taylor Brands comes in. Taylor Brands will simplify your start by making business setup easy, helping you launch with everything you need to succeed. It'll set up your LLC in minutes and protect your personal assets from business liabilities. You'll benefit from expert guidance with a personalized coach program to help you navigate your first 100 days in business. Receive a tailored business plan to map out your roadmap for success. Branding tools will also be involved. You can create your own brand identity with access to powerful branding tools that help you stand out. And of course, we'll hook you up with a 35% discount. All you have to do is go to Taylor Brands, TAILORBRANDS.com/podcast35 to get started. That's taylorbrands.com/podcast35. Don't be a statistic. Set your business up right from day one. All right, Andy, on to our crazy martini now. And for this one, we should tell parents that if you've got small kids near you, hit the pause button and resume this final martini when they are no longer within earshot. But it is worth talking about because, as we've just been saying, Elon Musk was asking folks, hey, what'd you do last week? Well, in some cases, they kind of copped an attitude. Many of them didn't respond at all. Other people were finding out what they actually do on a regular basis, and it ain't good. Chris Rufo over at the Manhattan Institute, along with his colleague Hannah Grossman, with this exclusive. This is Rufo. Hannah Grossman and I have obtained logs from the NSA's secret transgender sex chat room, in which NSA, CIA, and DIA employees discuss genital castration, artificial vaginas, fetishes. There's more to it, but I'll just leave it at that for public consumption here. The next thing, I don't even know what that means, and other things are so vile I don't even want to say them. But in addition to the fact that those are the things they're talking about, it gets worse. Rufo says the NSA maintains a chat system for the intelligence community called IntelLink. The servers are supposed to be used for government work, but gender activists have hijacked at least 2 channels. He says, according to our sources, the sex chats were legitimized as part of the NSA's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Activists within the agency used LGBTQ+ employee resource groups to turn their kinks and pathologies into official work duties. According to the current NSA employee, must have been a whistleblower here, these groups spent all day recruiting activists and holding meetings with titles such as privilege, ally awareness, pride, and transgender community inclusion. And they did so with the full support of NSA leadership, which declared that DEI was, quote, not only mission critical, but mission imperative, unquote. Andy, I don't want to have to choose between them rifling through my private information without a warrant, which is some of what the NSA likes to do. I definitely don't want them using taxpayer time and dollars to do this. And the fact that it was all given thumbs up by the leadership of different agencies, sensitive agencies, mind you, in our government, absolutely maddening.
Yeah, although I would note that Musk obviously does have a sense of humor, because he said that at least we know what these people were doing last week.
Right. Unfortunately.
You know why this is really bad? I mean, look, the stuff about how the NSA scoops up a lot of information that it shouldn't. On the one hand, I think it's overblown. On the other hand, it is resonant of an important evolution, which may not be, and maybe it's a devolution of the of our Fourth Amendment understanding. It used to be that you'd actually have to get court permission to go out and capture information, and then you'd have it. Now they let you capture it, and then you can, after the fact, ask what you can look for. And there's a lot of issues that come out of this that are profound. But the problem with something like this, other than the obviously lurid nature of it that makes it so difficult to discuss, is we're talking about entities that, if you combine the military and intelligence budget, Greg, the last year I think that we have numbers for is 2023. It's just a hair under $100 billion a year that we spend on it. I think it's about $72 billion for the 18 intelligence agencies that actually aren't military intelligence agencies. So we're spending an unbelievable amount of the public's money on these entities, and they've missed everything from, like the Tet Offensive to the fall of the Berlin Wall to 9/11. I mean, it seems like they're not particularly great at intelligence. People ask me all the time about the FBI. I think that one of the big problems with the FBI is that after 9/11, it became more of the ethos of an intelligence agency than what it used to be, which was kind of a cops and robbers sort of thing that it was very good at. I think it's a mediocre intelligence agency, but I think we get mediocre performance across the board from our intelligence agencies. And yet we just keep throwing more resources and money at them. I remember after 9/11, we had the 9/11 Commission. If you remember, the big problem with 9/11 was information sharing. Remember we had all these words back then, a whole new glossary. Stovepiping. Remember, yes. It was like, you couldn't, they didn't share information. It was all brought into each individual entity. And so what was the solution to all of that? They took a 17 agency entity that they call the U.S. intelligence community, and they added an 18th bureaucracy on top of it that was apparently going to solve the information sharing problem. And within about 2 years, it became a bloated 500-person bureaucracy that isn't particularly good at making intelligence sharing, but it's very good at growing the federal government, which is what all these agencies do. And now I just feel the same way with this story as I kind of feel with FISA, which is that, they tell us everything's running smoothly and that they're a very professional operation. But every time you peek under the rock, they're doing something wrong. Every time they keep telling us because of national security, and I'm sympathetic to this because I understand the idea that you have to protect methods and sources of intelligence, and we can't protect the country without them. But they use that as a pretext to not tell us stuff. And then every now and then there's some scandal that we get to look under the veil of what they're doing, and we see crap like this. It's maddening. So I don't know if it's time for another Tower Commission. I really think it's time, probably past time, and there's a lot of issues that could go into this, including the structure of the FBI, is it right? The structure of the intelligence community. But as long as we're in this mode where we should be looking hard at this and trying to cut the fat and maybe cut out agencies if we don't need them, somebody ought to be taking a hard look at these intelligence agencies, not only what they do but what we spend on them. And if people have time for this kind of stuff, then they should be doing something else for a living.
No, I completely agree. And yeah, consolidating, we obviously need an intelligence community, but there's certainly personnel clearly on the job who aren't doing anything related to that. And the fact that they were given the green light to do it means that there are people in management who need to go as well. Because, I mean, when that's your top priority at some of the most sensitive, most critical agencies in our government, you've lost the plot big time. And so I have no problem seeing heads roll in that situation. So crazy stuff, Andy. I'm sure there'll be more craziness by the time we convene tomorrow. I appreciate your time as always. See you then.
Enjoyed it, Greg. Thank you.
Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, National Review Online contributing editor, Fox News contributor, and the author of Ball of Collusion, as well as many other excellent books. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us all on X. Andy is at Andrew C. McCarthy. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Tuesday and join Andy and me on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.